Hello, I'm Michael, and this is Tarot by the Tree. We continue with our study of the minor arcana. We're into the fourth suit now, or our final suit, swords. And we are at the Nine of Swords today, remembering that the 10 of any suit means completion of a cycle. And a cycle can be completed with joy or sadness or any number of ways. Today we're looking at this card. It's the Nine of Swords. It's fairly self-explanatory. And as we get to the end of the suit of swords, we'll see a sad story unfolding. We remember that the tarot cards are not rules to live by. They're archetypes to explore. And it gives us a little view of what can happen or will happen in the future. We're talking about power in the suit of swords. There are only four suits, and they're big things like happiness, ideas, and plans, the money, the wealth that allows you to be independent, and power. And of course, power is a big thing. There are times when the degree of power may be the only meaningful consideration. We also talked a bit about the five types of behavioral motivations that people have, and one of them is power. It gets confusing. Some people want control, and that's a different thing. People who want power, it's an insatiable need, and we all have it to some extent. Power simplifies things. It gives us control over things. But a power seeker is never satisfied. I know for Jocelyn and I, as teachers, if there is a difficult student who is a power seeker, the only answer is to give them power. They have to be in charge of cleaning blackboard brushes or choosing which row exits first or whatever. Power seeker craves power the way some people crave food, and it may not even be conscious. I'm sure there are a lot of power seekers who just go through their life always wanting to have the last word in the conversation and always wanting their view to be correct. Here's what Waite has to say about the Nine of Swords. One seated on her couch in lamentation with the swords over her. She is as one who knows no sorrow which is like unto hers. It is a card of utter desolation. There's not many shades of gray in that. We'll take a look at swords and power, a little review. To gain power over yourself is something. We often look at that as personal strength. It gives us the ability to say no to something. We can't be forced. And it gives us the ability to insist on yes for doing something. We can prove ourselves. We have a reputation, we have a little bit of authority, which will go with the acquisition of power. Power is very often externally measured. How can you alter outside influences? And that will become the measure of power. When it comes to power, at least as much as the other suits, and maybe more, we all desire it. It's our wings, it gives us freedom, but more than that, it satisfies needs within us, very primal needs, and it gives us the respect of our peers. It's very hard, maybe impossible for people to turn away from the acquisition of power. This is the Nine of Swords, and as we know from the Tarot by the Tree system, all the tarot cards tell us a lot at face value. We have to see their place on the tree to interpret. the card. And the place on the tree is the ninth place. And it's often thought about in the tree of life as the hermit. This is a glimmer of truth and higher reality. You didn't have it before, but something, the clouds have moved and you can see the shine of something truer and something better. Its alter ego on the tree of knowledge is judgment. What seemed at first as a glimmer of light aimed only at you, you realize in time that it was more of an all call, and many people were being called and were being awakened to reality. It's people who are no longer living in self-deception and their imagination. We'll describe the card. Weight refers to this card as a woman. As you know, she is on the center pillar. That's between the feminine and the masculine pillars, normally called the path of mildness. As in all the tarot cards, they can represent either sex. In this case, we'll continue with what Weight has started us as calling this person a woman. A woman wakes up at night. She weeps in sorrow. She sits up in bed and covers her face with both hands. She wears a white nightgown. Her blanket is a patchwork quilt of roses, the symbol of love. The other squares on the blanket are faded and indistinct, sort of made up of dots, like they've worn out or they're temporary. They are the symbols of mystical astrological signs. There is a carving on her bed suggesting defeat in battle, the end of a fencing match. Above her, hanging on the dark wall, are 9 swords. The meaning of the card. It's fairly blunt. You are not as powerful as you pretended to be. You have been tested and found to be false. Up to now, you have been seeking power. And perhaps recently it's been more the guise of appearing powerful. You failed. Your power was insufficient and people suffered. You have lost love. People are disappointed with your failure, and there is very little sympathy for you. In the past, the way you saw yourself was strong, righteous, and respected. This is one of the higher numbers of the sword suit, and this is a powerful person, or more specifically, they were a powerful person. But things have changed. Power is always relative, and there was always a greater power than you. But power seekers may have the need to believe they have more power than they really do, and they may have the need to issue or accept a challenge. This has happened. This has happened twice, and the person in this card is getting a big dose of reality all of a sudden. They've woken up that night with a great feeling of loss and a very unpleasant feeling that they may have been on the wrong path for some time. Now this person sees themselves as weak. Remembering strength and weakness are always relative. But this person sees themselves as relatively weak and as being revealed as a pretender. We mentioned before that with the suit of swords comes a kind of heroic prerequisite. For a person to be powerful, we often hold them to a more heroic standard. In this card, reality suddenly floods in. They had pretenses before, they had delusions before, and they suddenly think to themselves, power wasn't the answer. I have power, but I've lost much more than what I've gained. You recognize cruelty in your past actions, or at least a lack of compassion. At the time, you thought you were responding to a need, using your power in a heroic fashion. But this night you wake up and you have great insight into your motivations, and you find that some of the things you did were petty, non essential, and self serving. You pretended to have power you did not possess. There are some great feelings going through this card, which are obvious, but just express them. Regret. You would do differently now. This is an onslaught of sudden wisdom, but it's too little and it comes too late. No hope. One of the saddest things about this card is the person can see no way out. Once powerful in many areas, they now realize that relatively they have no power in the parts of their life that ironically are the most important to them. They were fighting non-essential battles. You feel guilt. Your action or non-action has hurt people, and they are no longer a part of your life. And we've talked about the fragility of friendships before, and devoting your life to power is a sure way to restrict, limit, and lose some of those friendships. And finally, worry and anxiety. We will see, as bad as things are at this moment, it does not mean they cannot get worse. And on that somber note, let's turn to some of the questions.
Why exactly is she crying?
She's lost some love, and some of the things she took pride in seem petty now. She's reevaluating her life, and she thinks that she's been on the wrong track, and the cost she measures in the loss of affection.
Are those astrological or signs of the zodiac on her blanket? Does that prove that astrology is part of the tarot?
In my studies, I have no evidence that astrology is part of tarot. People who tried to find the secret of the meaning of the tarot cards went in all kinds of directions, from in-depth study of the pathways to this inclusionist idea that the tarot cards must somehow embody all other wisdoms. Astrology, zodiac, really interesting, based on the heavens. It does not have a relevance to tarot cards and the Kabbalah. Those are separate studies. In this case, we see the signs of the zodiac as fading, as if their design is disappearing. And to me, this is a symbol of false past beliefs. And some of the things they held to be true, they realize now that they have no validity in their real life situation.
Is the carving on her bed depicting a sword fight?
Yes, you have to look closely, but it's very clearly a sword fight. Looks specifically like a fencing match. One person has just completed a thrust and lunge, and the other person has actually fallen down, and the match would be ended. This is a symbol of defeat. And that's the thing with power at the time that you are using your power and defeating something, you will feel heroic and strong and righteous. But sometimes looking back, you will see that those were just games your ego played with your mind, and it sometimes disguised cruelty.
Has she just awoken from a nightmare?
Um, just the opposite. She's just awoken from a dream of her past where she had friends, affection, and love. She's awoken from that pleasant dream of her past to the reality that she knows is hard, it's difficult, and she fears that there's even worse happening tomorrow.
Is this card about losing power?
No, she at no point in this did she lose power. She was always powerful, but there's always a power more powerful than you or her, and she attracted this. As she regained her power, she adopted some power that wasn't really fairly hers. She has not lost power. She still has power. This is a card about the abuse of power. And she did not use her power for just the emergency of self defense and the plus values of confidence and respect. She abused her power. And the whole suit of cards from warns about if you use a sword, you will cut yourself a bit in the process. As we near the end of the suit of cards into the completion of the power sequence, we will see um, sort of a reference to that saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that will be reflected in the suit of swords.
Can she undo or repair the damage she has caused?
No, and that's part of the realization. There are no roads out of this. She is on a downbound slope right now, and she's not quite hit bottom yet.
Is this a card that suggests we should not seek power?
No, absolutely not. First of all, it's impossible. Not wanting to seek power would be like not wanting to seek health or clear vision. These are things that make everything else better. We all seek power. I think the lesson to the suit of cards is get power, keep it, develop it, but then hide it. Don't use it. Be careful when you do. Be humble and always put the lens of compassion up before you exercise power.
Final thoughts.
It's almost like a mental condition, a person who seeks power. And if we are that kind of people, we should recognize it, we should be aware of it, and we should limit our use of power. I think the question whether or not we are power seekers, whether or not we feel powerful or powerless, is what good is power if it attracts aggression? It's like walking amongst a pack of dogs with raw meat hanging from your belt. It's not going to work out well for you. Anyway, that's my final thought today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow for the end of a cycle, the Ten of Swords. Bye for now.